courtroom, the two officers who arrested me were snickering from the witness stand. The judge's gavel slammed down, demanding order. That's when the doors burst open, and my father, the director of the FBI, walked in. Their laughter died instantly. The late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy of ancient oaks, dappling the pristine sidewalks of Silver Creek in gold. I was walking home, my tote bag, heavy with art history textbooks, slung over my shoulder. My mind was still lost in the brushstrokes of Renaissance masters from my AP study group, a pleasant haze of chiaroscuro and sfumato. Silver Creek was my home, a neighborhood of manicured lawns and quiet streets where my family had moved 6 months ago. But as a 16-year-old black girl, I was also a walking contradiction to its unspoken code. I knew this. My parents had made sure of it. The low rumble of an engine pulled me from my thoughts. A police cruiser. It slowed its pace to match mine, crawling along the curb beside me. My heart gave a little kick against my ribs. The talk. I'd had it since I was 12. Keep your hands visible, Zoe. Speak respectfully. No sudden movements. Your goal is just to get home safe. The rules echoed in my head, a somber mantra passed down through generations. The cruiser's lights flashed, a silent, predatory blink. Hey you, stop right there, a voice called out. I stopped, turning slowly, my hands deliberately out of my pockets and at my sides. Good afternoon, officers, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Is something wrong? Two men got out. The older one, whose name tag read Miller, had a sour, impatient look. The younger one, Davis, seemed eager, a little too ready for action. You match the description of a suspect we're looking for, Davis said, his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. What are you doing in this neighborhood? The question hung in the air, thick with implication. This neighborhood, not your neighborhood. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. I live here, sir, on Oak Lane. I was just at a study group at the library. Officer Miller circled me like a shark, his eyes scanning my distressed jeans and stylish denim jacket. Sure you do, kid. Got any ID? Yes, sir. It's in my wallet in my tote bag, I said, narrating my every move as my dad had taught me. I'm going to reach for it now. Okay. They exchanged a look of smug amusement. Well, aren't you well trained? Miller sneered. I slowly pulled out my school ID. It had my name and photo, but not my address. Miller flicked it with his finger. This doesn't prove anything. I can call my father if you'd like. I offered, my last thread of patience fraying. He can verify our address. This seemed to be the funniest thing they'd heard all day. Oh, but Daddy gonna vouch for you? Miller chuckled a nasty, grating sound. What's he do around here? Mow the lawns. Davis joined in. Or maybe he's the pool boy. Heat flooded my face, hot and prickly. I thought of my father's words. Your dignity is worth more than their ignorance. He worked for the federal government. I said, the words clipped and quiet. Their laughter boomed, echoing in the quiet suburban street. Sure he does, kid. Davis snorted. Probably cleaning toilets at the post office. I couldn't take it anymore. I reached for my phone in my back pocket. I can call him right now, and I never finished. In a flash, Miller lunged, grabbing my arm and twisting it violently behind my back. She's reaching for something, he yelled, a performative shout for an audience that wasn't there. My phone, clearly visible, clattered to the sidewalk. Seconds later, my face was slammed against the hot metal of their patrol car, the smell of sun-baked paint filling my nostrils. I was just getting my phone. I gasped, pain shooting up my arm. Yeah, that's what they all say, Davis said coolly, cuffing my wrist with a vicious click. The cold metal bit into my skin as they shoved me into the back of their car, my art history books spilling out of my bag onto the pavement. The world outside the smeared window blurred as we pulled away, leaving a piece of my innocence shattered on the sidewalk of my own street. The police station smelled of stale coffee and industrial-grade cleaner, a scent I'll forever associate with humiliation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly, sterile glow on everything. My wrists were raw from the handcuffs, which they'd left on far longer than necessary. Name? The intake sergeant barked without looking up. Zoe Washington, I said. He snorted. Speak up, girl. This isn't your art class. I repeated my name, louder this time, fighting the tremble in my voice. They took my fingerprints, the cold ink smearing on my skin like a stain, and then a mugshot. "Don't smile," the officer instructed, as if I had any reason to. My belongings, my wallet, my keys, the silk scarf I'd been wearing, were dropped into a plastic bin. "I need to call my father," I said for what felt like the 10th time. The officer yawned. "You get your call when we say you get your call." I knew that wasn't right. I knew I had rights. But arguing here felt like stepping into a cage with a hungry lion. Officer Davis reappeared, a triumphant smirk on his face. "Got one of those honor roll thugs," he announced to the room, grabbing my arm with unnecessary force. A few officers chuckled. "Claims her daddy worked for the government," he added. "Yeah, the government that sends her a welfare check," someone called out from a desk. More laughter. Each step felt like a new wave of shame washing over me. I kept my eyes fixed on the grimy floor, building a wall inside myself, brick by brick. Davis finally shoved me into a holding cell, the metal door clanging shut with a sound of finality. "Welcome to your new penthouse suite, princess," he sneered before walking away. The cell was cold and bare, just a metal bench and a toilet. I wasn't alone. An older black man with kind, tired eyes sat on the bench. He looked up as I entered, his gaze assessing but not judgmental. "First time?" he asked quietly after the officer's footsteps faded. I nodded, rubbing the angry red marks on my wrists. "Mr. Henderson," he said, offering his name like a small gift. "Zoe," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "What they get you for?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Existing in the wrong neighborhood," I said, a bitter edge creeping into my voice. He gave a sad, knowing nod. The classic walking while black charge. A very serious offense around here. His sarcasm was heavy with the weight of experience. For the next hour, Mr. Henderson became my teacher. He taught me the unwritten rules of survival inside this system. He told me when to speak and when to stay silent. His most important lesson was simple. Patience, little sister. Right now, patience is your sharpest weapon. Meanwhile, across town, my father, FBI Director Marcus Washington, stood at the head of a conference table in a secure room deep within the Hoover building. He was in the final stages of briefing his team on a massive counterterrorism operation. My dad was known for his unshakable calm, a focus so intense it felt like a physical force. An urgent knock interrupted the meeting. His assistant, Agent Torres, entered, her expression immediately telling him this was not routine. "Excuse me, Director," she said, her voice low. "There's an urgent message regarding your daughter." My father's composed exterior didn't change, but a switch flipped behind his eyes. He gave a slight nod to his team. "Continue. I'll be back shortly." In the hallway, Agent Torres gave him the details. I had been arrested, denied a phone call. They only knew because a neighbor had witnessed it and called my mother, Lena, a civil rights attorney who was, ironically, in court fighting a case of police misconduct. A controlled fury, cold and precise, settled over my father's features. "Thank you, Agent Torres," he said, his voice level. "Inform Deputy Director Clark he's taking over. Have my car brought around." As she hurried away, he made 3 calls. The first to my mother, the second to his security detail, the third to the Attorney General's office. He hadn't risen to become the first black director of the FBI by letting rage dictate his actions. He had learned to master the system, to bend its rules and channels to his will. Now, that entire system was about to be aimed like a weapon at the small-town police department that had dared to touch his daughter. My father arrived at the station not in a motorcade, but in an unmarked sedan. He wore a simple, dark suit, no badge, no fanfare. It was his observer uniform, the one he wore when he wanted to see the system in its natural state before it knew it was being watched. He walked in, and the world inside didn't even pause. He approached the front desk, where the same sergeant who'd processed me was deliberately ignoring a line of anxious-looking people. "Excuse me," my father said, his voice polite but firm. The sergeant didn't look up. "Take a seat. I'll get to you. I'm here about Zoe Washington," my father stated, his voice cutting through the sergeant's practiced indifference. "I'm her father." The sergeant finally looked up, his eyes narrowing as he took in my father's appearance. A well-dressed black man. His expression soured further. "Washington? Yeah, we got her. Resisting arrest, suspicious activity. You can wait over there." He gestured vaguely toward the hard plastic chairs. "I'd like to see my daughter now," my father said. His tone hadn't changed, but the politeness had been replaced by something hard and unyielding. The sergeant's face flushed. "Listen, buddy, we got procedures. She ain't fully processed. You'll see her when we're good and ready." "My daughter is 16 years old," my father replied, his gaze unwavering. "She is legally entitled to have a parent present. Has she been allowed her one phone call?" The sergeant's patience snapped. He stood up, using his bulk to try to intimidate. "You're holding up the line. Take a seat or leave." A few nearby officers had started to watch, sensing a confrontation. My father calmly reached into his suit jacket. The sergeant's hand instinctively drifted toward his weapon. Instead of an ID, my father produced a simple, elegant business card and placed it on the counter. "I believe Captain Reeves will want to know I'm here," he said quietly. The sergeant picked up the card, annoyed. He glanced at it. Then his eyes widened in disbelief. He read it again, his bravado deflating like a punctured tire. The card didn't say FBI. It was far more specific. It said, "Marcus Washington, Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation." "Wait here," the sergeant mumbled, his face pale, and scrambled away to a back office. The change in the station's atmosphere was immediate and seismic. Lounging officers suddenly found urgent paperwork to file. The phones that had been ringing endlessly were suddenly answered. A few minutes later, a woman in her 50s with captain's bars on her uniform hurried out, her face a mask of panic. "Director Washington," Captain Sandra Reeves said, her voice loud enough to make every head in the room turn. "I had no idea. Please come with me." As they walked down a private hallway, she spoke in a hushed, frantic tone. "Sir, I am so sorry. If I had known your daughter was—" "Let's discuss this in your office, Captain," my father interrupted smoothly. Once inside, he declined her offer of a seat. "Where's my daughter?" "She's in holding. I'll have her brought to an interview room immediately." "Not yet," my father said. "First, I want to speak with the arresting officers, Miller and Davis. They're just finishing their shift, sir." "I can." "Now, Captain," he said. The simple command carried the weight of the entire federal government. She immediately picked up her phone. 10 minutes later, Miller and Davis swaggered in, annoyed at being summoned. "You wanted to see us, Cap?" Miller asked. "This gentleman," Reeves said, her voice tight, "has some questions about the arrest of a 16-year-old girl named Zoe Washington." The officers exchanged a look. The suspect was behaving suspiciously. "Captain," Davis began, launching into their fabricated story. She became confrontational, reached for what could have been a weapon. My father, who had been standing silently by the window, finally spoke. "And when my daughter told you her father worked for the federal government, what was your response?" A confused silence filled the room. The blood drained from both officers' faces as the horrifying realization dawned on them. "Your daughter?" Miller stammered. Captain Reeves cleared her throat, her voice trembling slightly. "Gentlemen, this is Director Marcus Washington of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The name landed like a bomb. Davis took an involuntary step back. Miller's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had been completely annihilated. "Now," my father said, his voice deceptively calm, "let's talk about what really happened today." Being home was supposed to feel safe, but the station's sterile smell and the ghost sensation of handcuffs on my wrists followed me. I'd wake up from nightmares of laughing, faceless officers, my heart pounding against my ribs. The sound of a distant siren would make my muscles clench. The confident, art-loving girl who walked out of the library that afternoon felt like a stranger now. Our house transformed. The kitchen island, usually covered in my mom's legal briefs and my art sketches, became a war room. My mother, Dr. Lena Washington, a force of nature in the courtroom, had canceled her appearances. My dad, quiet and focused, brought home thick files every night. They were a team, a perfect fusion of legal brilliance and strategic power. This wasn't random, my dad said one evening, spreading documents across the island. This is their first rodeo, but not for lack of practice. He'd had his analysts dig into Miller and Davis. The results were sickening. A dozen excessive force complaints between them in 3 years, nearly all involving minorities, and all of them dismissed by the same internal review board member. A review board member who happens to be the police commissioner's brother-in-law, my mom added, her voice laced with cold anger. But it went deeper. My dad's team found a pattern in the precinct's arrest statistics. Black residents in neighborhoods like ours were stopped, searched, and arrested at rates that were statistically impossible to be random. Then they found the smoking gun, an unofficial, off-the-books initiative called Community Purity. In emails, officers, including Miller and Davis, discussed maintaining neighborhood standards and deterring undesirable elements, all thinly veiled code for systematic racial profiling. They have a system, my dad explained, his voice grim. It's designed to intimidate, to make people of color feel like they don't belong, even in their own homes. Listening to them, a heavy weight settled in my chest. It wasn't just about 2 bad cops. It was a machine. I had just been the latest gear it had tried to crush. That night, I heard them talking in the living room. Their strategies differed. My mom, the frontline warrior, wanted to file a massive, public lawsuit immediately. We put everything on the record. Marcus, she argued. We create a public firestorm they can't extinguish. My dad, the grand strategist, advocated for a more patient, encompassing approach. A lawsuit is reactive, Lena. I'm thinking bigger. A full federal pattern or practice investigation. We don't just cut down the tree. We pull it out by the roots. He was worried about the perception of a conflict of interest. They'll say I'm using the Bureau for a personal vendetta. Let them, my mom shot back. This was never just about Zoe. She was just the one they couldn't bury. I sat on the stairs, listening, caught between their 2 powerful approaches. The incident had ripped away my innocence, exposing the ugly framework of the world that my parents had always fought against. It wasn't an abstract concept from a history book anymore. It was real, it was personal, and now it was our family's battle. And slowly, a new feeling began to replace the fear and humiliation, resolve. I realized I had to be more than just the victim in my own story. I had to become a fighter, too. The invitation arrived 3 days later, a carefully worded email from the police commissioner's office proposing a private resolution meeting. It was the classic move of the powerful. Try to solve a scandal with a checkbook and a gag order. After a family meeting where my parents laid out the options, I looked at them both and said, "No deals. Let's fight." My dad smiled, a flicker of immense pride in his eyes. The meeting was held in the wood-paneled chambers of Judge Brennan, Officer Miller's uncle, a transparent attempt at intimidation. My dad walked in alone, a picture of calm authority, and sat across from the commissioner, the judge, and a nervous city attorney. The commissioner started with a syrupy, insincere apology. Then came the offer. All charges dropped. The officers suspended for 2 weeks. And a settlement. $100,000 in exchange for our silence. A standard confidentiality agreement, the attorney chirped. My dad let the silence stretch before he spoke. And if I find these terms insufficient, Judge Brennan leaned back, the implied threat clear in his voice. Director, we all have professional reputations to consider. A public spectacle could create the appearance of impropriety for a man in your position. My dad didn't flinch. He simply looked at each man in turn. Gentlemen, before I respond, I should inform you of a few things. His voice remained level, conversational. First, I formally recused myself from any FBI involvement the day after my daughter's arrest. This is now a Department of Justice matter. The commissioner and judge exchanged a nervous glance. Second, my dad continued, the DOJ Civil Rights Division opened a preliminary pattern or practice investigation into this department yesterday. The statistical evidence they're using predates my daughter's experience by several years. The city attorney swallowed hard. Third, all evidence from Zoe's arrest, body cam footage, dispatch records, the officer's complaint histories, has been preserved under federal protocol. Any attempt to alter it now would be obstruction of justice. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And finally, I've already provided a detailed statement to an investigative journalist from the Tribune. She's preparing a piece on the Community Purity Initiative. The only reason it hasn't run is because I asked her to wait. The room was utterly silent. My dad had dismantled their entire strategy. He had anticipated their every move and outmaneuvered them at every turn. He stood up. "I will be declining your offer. Good day, gentlemen." As they had hoped, the case was not dismissed. It went to a public arraignment, but with Judge Brennan recused. My mom represented me. It felt like watching a master artist at work. She was magnificent. She entered the dispatch records into evidence, showing they were looking for a white man in his 30s. She played the enhanced dashcam audio, and the whole courtroom heard Miller and Davis mocking me, laughing about my dad mowing lawns. Their faces went ashen. The final witness was not for me, but against the system. The defense called Deputy Director Thomas Clark of the FBI. He testified that a federal task force was investigating the department for civil rights violations. He spoke of the Community Purity Initiative and a coordinated effort to discourage minority presence in certain neighborhoods. The reporters in the gallery were scribbling furiously. Miller and Davis looked at each other in pure terror. They finally understood. My father's quiet composure hadn't been weakness. It had been the calm before a hurricane. As we left the courthouse, surrounded by cameras, my mom put her arm around me. "What happened to my daughter is not unique," she told the reporters. "What's unique is that she has parents with the resources to fight back. This isn't about getting special treatment for our child. It's about getting equal treatment for everyone else's." I stood beside her, my fear finally gone, replaced by a strength I never knew I had. 6 months later, the hurricane my father had unleashed made landfall. The Department of Justice announced a consent decree forcing a complete, federally monitored overhaul of the Oak Ridge Police Department. The Community Purity program was dismantled. The commissioner resigned in disgrace. Officer Miller faced criminal charges. The change wasn't just institutional. It was personal. The fear they had tried to plant in me had blossomed into purpose. With my parents' help, I started a student group called Youth for Equal Justice. We held workshops, created Know Your Rights pamphlets for teens, and built a platform for other young people to safely share their stories. Mr. Henderson, the kind man from the holding cell, became our wisest mentor. My dad was called to testify before Congress on policing reform. The officers who arrested my daughter were not merely bad apples, he told them. They were the predictable fruit of a poisoned orchard. Real reform must address the entire orchard. The fight was far from over, but we had forced the darkness into the light. One evening, my dad and I sat on the back porch. The sun was setting over the neighborhood that had almost broken me. "You know," he said quietly, "I never told you why I joined the FBI." He told me about my grandfather, his father, who was wrongfully arrested when my dad was just a boy. He spent months in jail, lost his job, and came home a broken man. There was no one to fight for him, my dad said. That day, I decided I would work from the inside, to get into a position where I could stop that from happening to other families. Tears welled in my eyes. I finally understood. The fight I was fighting wasn't just mine. It was his. It was my grandfather's. It was a legacy. "Do you think Grandpa will be proud?" I asked. He put his hand on my shoulder. "He would be proud of who you've become. Someone who faced injustice and chose to turn it into a force for change. This experience changed my life. It taught me that injustice thrives in silence, and that your voice is your power." Have you ever witnessed something you knew was wrong? What did you do? Share your stories in the comments below, and please, always comment with respect. If my story resonated with you, hit that like button, share it, and subscribe for more stories about fighting for what's right. Because together, we can make sure no one has to fight alone.